Howdy, everybody. Thank you for joining the Anime Initiative, the anime-focused segment of Comic Book Nation, where you get all sorts of good geek culture stuff throughout the week. I'm Nick Valdez. You might be wondering why you're hearing my voice a little earlier than usual. It's because, our leader, Megan Peters, is out. She's currently in the midst of a very well-deserved vacation.
Mm-hmm.
She's also in one of those pods that Goku was in Namek, so she's just kind of getting back to she's getting back to full strength. But thankfully, I'm not alone here. I'm also with Evan Valentine, my cohort, my correspondent, my everything.
Always great to be here. And as we said right before we started filming, we are ready to be unleashed without Megan.
Yeah. Yes, the boys are back in town, and we are never leaving again. So, we have a ton to talk about this week. We have Godzilla Kong, a sequel, got a major update. Of course, Demon Slayer is finally back for season 4, so we'll be talking about that in length much later. Full spoilers. That's the second half of the show. We have My Hero Academia had a major death in season 7, so we will be talking about that. We'll give you a good little spoiler warning ahead of that. And we just, and a One Piece Cafe opened up in America officially. We talked about that before, but we also have a nice little update for you all. So, but first, Evan, let's get into Godzilla Kong's sequel. So Godzilla Kong, right? Of course, it's been taking over the MonsterVerse. Previous highest grossing was Kong Skull Island at 564, somewhere around there, million around the world in total gross. And Godzilla Kong, the New Empire, is already basically at that mark. So it was no surprise to find out that Legendary was already planning to continue the MonsterVerse with something new. So they are starting to work on it with a writer. Dave Callahan has been tapped to write the next major Godzilla Kong movie, whatever form that takes. And this writer has been involved in huge projects like Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Mortal Kombat. What are you feeling about this, Evan?
So it's very funny because so Legendary has yet to actually confirm that there will be a Godzilla Kong 3,
right.
But the news has arrived that there will be a writer for the movie that has not been confirmed yet. It's very funny in that regard. As I think that when it comes to Godzilla Kong, the New Empire, when we talked about it originally, we were kind of like, Megan liked it the most, then me, and then you. And I think that I think that there's room for improvement with the third one. And as we've kind of reported on it, we have yet to see whether or not Adam Wingard is going to be returning for this third movie, but he does have a lot of ideas for it. Do you remember those, Nick?
Yeah, because Adam Wingard, he is Legendary's expecting him to return. At least that's the report is. But he's also got some other projects he wants to take care of before that would even happen. And makes sense, right? Because the movie hasn't even been announced. But we're all just kind of moving forward with the idea that, of course, they're going to make more of these. And his ideas kind of range from just adding more monsters, which is kind of like the big way to go, I think, right, Evan?
Yeah. So one of the things that he has said, he hasn't said so much in terms of, he's hinted at the idea that very much like Godzilla Kong, the New Empire is Kong's movie, he wants to make the third one more of Godzilla's movie, which I totally agree with, because Godzilla got something crazy like, what was it, 8 minutes of screen time in the New Empire versus Kong's 45 minutes to an hour or whatever. But another thing that he did kind of hint at was the idea, he talked a lot about how much he loves Destroya. For those who don't know, Destroya is a kaiju that is effectively, what if you were to take Godzilla and King Ghidorah, fuse them together, and then multiply that times 10. That's effectively what Destroya is. And I think
putting the god in Godzilla, right? Straight up,
putting the god in Godzilla.
Yeah,
he would, or that kaiju specifically would make for a great addition to the MonsterVerse. He's one of the big ones that they haven't done yet. For me, this leads to a great question in terms of who we want to see appear in it. For me personally, I am a giant fan of Hedorah. For those who don't know, Hedorah is kind of like this is a poll, but he's kind of like the villain from Fern Gully, right? Uh he's he's effectively he is a kaiju that is made of pollution that is able to shift between a giant UFO form and a
Yeah.
giant kaiju form. And it's, to me, I the Godzilla versus Hedorah was the first giant monster movie I ever saw as a kid, and that image of Hedorah still scares me to this day, where it is able to pass, it floats over people and it kills them instantly. And so that idea, that vision, that image happening in the MonsterVerse would be great. How about you, Nick? Who'd you want to appear in it?
See, we've touched on this before. We got to talk about Godzilla X Kong. I said the X. Oh, whoop.
You are going to be raked over the coals for that one, man. Hunter X Hunter, Hunter.
But we got to talk about this before. We talked about MonsterVerse, and I'm of the camp that we got to get Gigan eventually, which means aliens, which is also like, do you introduce aliens to the MonsterVerse? Maybe not yet, but also who knows? We're like 6 movies in, right? And I want Jet Jaguar, I want Megalon. I kind of just want more of the classics. And one thing about the MonsterVerse itself, while I appreciate having Titans and having like these originals there, nothing really beats like a classic kaiju, a classic licensed kaiju. You know what I mean? Like, it's something hits different about like getting to see a Ghidorah on screen. And then Ghidorah could also come back. Like, we can do the Mecha King Ghidorah. Like, I don't, and that's my thing too. But with Godzilla Kong, it was also more of like a Kong Part 3 rather than a Godzilla movie, because like you said, Godzilla was only in it for like less than 10 minutes. So I don't know where the Kong story goes after this. Like, you have a Kong leading an empire, right? Like, where do you go?
Yeah, you have to, I mean, if we're talking like anime structure of this universe, you have to have it where just his entire army is wiped out by whatever new force is.
Yeah.
And he's at his lowest and he has to achieve something. Eddie Riemann, sorry if I'm getting that name wrong. Eddie, you had said how's the box office so far for this? It's nothing to worry. It's stellar. It's one of the biggest movies of 2024 so far. Godzilla Kong, the New Empire.
People love their big monkey. Yeah,
they do love their giant monsters. And I would love to pick your brain on this, Nick. That's one of the things that I'm always curious about is what do you think like they could improve in terms of, from, if they're going to make a third one of these, and I know that I liked New Empire a little more than you. What do you think like that Legendary and the MonsterVerse, what do you think they kind of need to take into account when they create a third movie in this series?
Well, the easy answer is less humans. And I know everyone's always like, oh, the humans don't matter. Unfortunately, they do. As we talked about previously with Godzilla Kong, the humans are literally like shoved in there to make themselves matter, and I get it. It's you need humans in there. You need actors for like the press circuit and stuff. We appreciate that. We appreciate getting to talk to actors. But at the same time, a fully animated Godzilla Kong movie where it's just kind of like Hollow Earth and monster fighting and stuff, I really feel like that could be pulled off, especially when you see Godzilla Kong and you see Kong's story play out in that stuff. And thankfully, it's getting a home media release very soon. I'm blanking on the date, unfortunately, Evan. I will look that up here in a second. Did not do my duty, but
that's fine. It's this month. We don't know when it's streaming on like Max or whatever, but we do know that it's coming out on digital video.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you for covering me for here. But
month.
Like that's what I'm thinking. It's just kind of like, don't be afraid to go fully animated with this. I don't mind the humans, but like I said before, I feel like they're better used as, going back to Dragon Ball Z Illusions and going back to maybe an army getting wiped out. it'd be
Yep.
cool to see like humans watching on a screen. I know it's not very entertaining movie wise, but like literally maybe follow them with drones or something, being like, oh, Godzilla's reaching, oh, he's evolved to a new level. Oh, you need
Yeah.
people just reacting to this stuff to like flesh it out. But I fully think an animated thing could work.
I'm down. I'm down for that idea, and I think that they did kind of in a way that New Empire did kind of pull back on the humans a little bit, but like I totally get the idea of just like, they can be watching from the sidelines a lot.
Yeah.
Like the main things that people talk about with New Empire is all of the kaiju stuff, and
Yeah.
it's just lean into that more with the third one. I think, yeah, that sounds like the best way to go about it.
Yeah, and we'll see how that shapes up soon. Whenever they officially announce this thing is happening,
whenever.
yeah, whenever. But so moving on, we talked about this earlier as well in a previous episode. The One Piece Cafe. We
Yes.
finally have one, the first real anime cafe. They open up all the time in Japan, but we finally got one here in Las Vegas. And now that it's officially open, Evan, you actually got a chance to speak with the people who opened this thing. How was it, Evan? Like, how was it picking their brain?
Oh man. So I've mentioned this. One of the hardest parts of our job, which we love very much, is we have to report a lot about all of these things that happen in Japan with anime in general, and all the cool stuff that they get that we never see here in North America. And one of the things as anime continues to grow bigger and bigger and become more popular is that slowly but surely more of those events and more of those locations and more of those things are making the jump from Japan to North America. One of which is the now open in Las Vegas One Piece Cafe. And I was able to talk with Andy Nguyen, with who was co-creator. He worked hand in hand with Toei Animation to help create this location. And one of the things that we as giant anime fans ourselves, we can always know when someone is really on board with like the anime property that they're working with. And I'm happy to report that Andy is very knowledgeable in the world of the Grand Line.
Good.
He knows what he's talking about. He was able to create one of the things that I think that folks can look at the menu online for the One Piece Cafe and kind of see all of the different food and drinks that they made. But the one thing that he was most proud of is that they were actually able to recreate the meat on the bone that Luffy eats all the time.
Oh, so
in
the
One
classic, like anime meat, right? Like the one you okay.
that anime meat, and they had to figure out the best way to do that. So while it isn't like a giant piece of steak on the bone, what they did is that they took an actual bone and they put a meatball around it and they cooked it, and that's how they kind of serve it and everything. And I think that that's just like, that's an ingenious way to do it, and that shows that they're committed to creating like this One Piece location. And if this isn't official or anything, but they have had like videos released online of, there is a giant line of people looking to get into this, and it just goes to show like how much North American anime fans have been looking forward to stuff like this. And
Yes.
honestly, like, I wish that I could go visit at some point. Hopefully, I told Andy specifically, like, man, if you come to Atlanta, please let me know, because I will totally be there to check out one of these One Piece restaurants. I would love to go.
You know, like now, especially knowing that they have the full '90s anime meat, like so for buddies, like buddies at home, like please, I know everyone knows that classic big meat with the bone through it. Like that's just one of those things that you never think you'd be able to see in real life. So like, that's so cool. I'm so glad this is working out, though.
Yeah,
like,
for
already,
real.
Right?
Yeah, Andy, I asked Andy because actually he's had experience with working and kind of creating these anime focused restaurants here in America. And he had previously done one that was Sanrio for Hello Kitty. He worked with Sanrio on that. And he had actually opened up a Naruto ramen shop as well in the past years. And I asked him, hey, if you're going to open up another one of these in the future, which anime do you want to tackle? Which one do you want an official version of? And he's like, well, I'm a big fan of Shonen Jump's Big Three, so I want to do an official Dragon Ball one. And while there have been Dragon Ball restaurants and cafes that have opened up in America, none of them have really been like quote unquote official. So that would be really cool to see. But I would love to hear your opinion, Nick. What anime cafe or restaurant would you love to see open up in North America?
Yeah, because I know we previously talked about this on Anime Initiative. I gave the joke answer Berserk, to like go along with the bit we're having run through the whole thing. I mean, I can't even imagine what kind of horror concoction that would lead to. But
Lord.
It's just like you think of like the food in anime, right? And you think of like what's the one thing that you always see in like anime aesthetic tweets, right? Like it's always like Studio Ghibli food. Right.
Yeah,
like you look at the way they cook their food, you look at like Spirited Away. Like I, of course, would turn into one of those giant pigs in Spirited Away because like the food looks so delicious. Like I would also eat that food. And that's kind of what I want. Like I want like those, you get those little slices of ham or whatever kind of meat it is, that nice little thickness. Like
that'd be so good.
Any restaurant or cafe that could replicate that anime aesthetic, that Studio Ghibli food specifically, I think would do gangbusters.
Yeah, that would do really. That would be so tough to recreate because they look so appetizing in general. Of course, there's like I've actually been catching up on Delicious in Dungeon. That would be amazing.
That'd be super fun too because they've had like recreations in Japan. Once again, this is stuff exclusive to Japan. Go figure. But they have stuff where they've made full like. In one episode specifically, there was like a pumpkin with a face on it that they were eating out of, and they made that soup. They made the full like pumpkin face with the soup in it. And I know it's like monsters, but I can't lie. That also seems very appetizing to me.
Yeah. Give me some of that ghost ice cream. I want that. Make it real somehow.
Oh man. So you just in terms of anime, like, and moving forward with the conversation here, My Hero Academia season 7, it's continuing with its second episode, and we will be getting into a very big spoiler for season 7, episode 2. So heads up, the English dub, unfortunately, has yet to release. There is no date for it yet, and I don't know if they're also going to dub the memories episodes, those 4 recap ones. So we'll see. There's yet to be an announcement. We'll keep you updated with that, of course. But heading into episode 2, as we saw with the premiere, Tomura Shigaraki is now fighting America's #1 hero, Star and Stripe, in the skies above Japan. And Star and Stripe was a huge MVP of the premiere. She was incredible. People like saw her in action for the first time and were like, yeah, this is America's #1 hero. Yeah, she took imagery from All Might because she was inspired from him as a child. And now that their fight continued in episode 2, well, once again, last spoiler, it's already over.
It's already finished. Oh man.
Yeah. So Evan, how are you feeling about Star and Stripe not only losing this fight, but losing it in such a quick and almost like almost of a bummer kind of fashion? Like, yeah, like I did not expect her to lose. Basically, it was like 5 minutes into the episode where the fight was over already.
Yeah. And I mentioned this last week, and I'm so glad that we can finally dig into this more because I had to really duck and dive around spoilers for this.
Yes.
This is once again Kohei Horikoshi at his best and at his worst because like Star and Stripe is a really cool character. Like she has ties to the early days of All Might. You can actually see her in the My Hero Academia's first movie, My Hero Academia 2 Heroes. She appears in a flashback, and that's referenced and everything, and her quirk is awesome. And this actually ties into a comment from Eddie that he just put, is it the best season or not? No.
I mean,
season 7 is not
Not yet. That's an interesting question though, an interesting
Mhm.
pivot. Like we'll talk about this more, but so I know I want to get Megan's opinion on this too, but like
Mhm.
best seasons of My Hero Academia, it kind of
Three.
I think it is three, right? I
Three.
think it
It's
has to
three.
be three. Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Pound for pound, it's probably three. I mean, four, it's like every other one has kind of its strengths and weaknesses, but I think three kind of works in such a good way that it brings everything together. And it has like three has the amazing fight between All Might and All for One, which just works so well. But season 7, I mean, we're only 2 episodes into season 7 as it is, but like losing Star and Stripe immediately off the bat, um, it just kind of makes you think like, well, why was she even introduced to begin with? I mean, like,
right.
she had the potential to be such a cool character that was like added in terms of adding this new foil to the Battle of the Final Saga, where we're able to see like, oh, maybe the heroes do have like this new hero that has come out and is able to do this amazing thing with New Order, where she's just kind of yeah, Kofi, our good coworker Kofi, in the comments kind of said it's such a weird pivot, to bring in America so late and so briefly. And it's true. Like, I think that like she could have worked a lot better as like this heir apparent to All Might, who could technically be the new symbol of peace, but like, and this was those who read the manga also had this complaint, but it seems so much faster here in the anime because
Yeah.
it just happens immediately. She's off the playing field, and while she does buy them like an additional week in terms of Shigaraki being taken off the playing field, it's just could have been done better. Could have been
Yeah.
this battle could have been longer.
Yeah, as it stands now with episode 2, and then seeing it again play out in this fashion, like in the manga, of course, when you're reading it week to week, it feels so longer, right? Like, because this fight, while not relatively long, it's still like in real time was like over the course of like 2.5 months, 3 months. So
Mm-hmm.
seeing it play out and end within like the first 5 minutes of episode 2, it's like, wow, you really realize how she's just kind of a plot device for the
Yeah.
war ahead, right? She's there to lose, to demonstrate, oh, this is why the rest of the world will not interfere with the final battle. This is
Mm-hmm.
this is another reason why Japan's on their own, and this is another reason why Deku and the other heroes really have to just figure this out without any outside help. And her her being there and adding that new order quirk, it's such like a game-changing quirk in terms of what it does. Like she
Mm-hmm.
touches things and changes their rules, but it's also not really touching things either, because she also gives her own quirk a new rule to like do whatever, and it also serves to make Shigaraki weaker so they can fight him later. But that's kind of like that's the downfall of it, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just she's just there to serve that purpose. And when you have such an electrifying looking character too, and someone who's so cool, and right off the
Mm-hmm.
bat you're like, wow, this is, and you're like, oh, America's hero, and just to immediately kind of wipe her away as a plot device, I guess it's the worst parts of superhero comics. I don't know. That's kind of what it felt like to me.
It's true. I mean, it's really Horikoshi. We've actually talked with it. I think Megan has interviewed him in the past, and he is a big giant fan of North American comic books. He's a big fan of Marvel and DC, and you can see that in Star and Stripes specifically in terms of like her appearance and how she acts and everything. And I've actually looked a lot about in doing research for this. If you look at the animation from Studio Bones in this recent episode, you can actually
Mhm.
see when her rule that she placed onto herself to make her look like All Might, as big as she is, she when that rule goes away, you can actually see the differences in the animation style between her immediately looking more like a North American comic book character, like Captain America, or or Thor or something like that, versus when she appears to look more like an anime character when she loses that rule on herself. And that's just, again, another very interesting aspect of the character that has been brought to life for such a short amount of time. And I think we're really losing something by losing her in this final arc of the series, for sure.
Yeah. And it's also kind of like, why didn't you do this in season 6? You know, because remember, I believe it was season 4 that, or it might have been season 5 that ended with the Endeavor high end fight that lasted for like 2 episodes. This could have been a good season 6 finale, right? Like it could have been like a good, Star and Stripe shows up, she does her thing, loses in the finale, and that's where we kind of ended on. And just in waiting for season 7, going, oh man, final battle is really
cliffhanger.
here. Yes,
what a cliffhanger that would have been.
So I guess that's part of it too. Is like it feels so clunky because it's just kind of shoved into this beginning that sort of like, okay, now we actually have to wait for the story to start up again, and I think that's the issue. It's now they're going to get a week of training, and that training could last for an episode. It could last for half an episode. Then it's got to set up like the final war. And it's been confirmed that there are 21 episodes this season. So it will be running through the rest of the spring and through the summer and ending sometime before the fall starts in October. So we have quite a bit of ways to like explore with this season. But also it's like when you look at Star and Stripe, you're like, this could have been season 6 and we could have just kind of jumped into the new stuff already. And yes, this is new, but here's my negativity coming out again. I'm sorry. With My Hero Academia,
that's why I love hearing you talk about My Hero. You're able to really hammer in those the comparison between like the manga and the anime. And I totally agree on some of the artistic stuff for that. But no, I totally agree with you. I think it would have worked way better as a season 6 finale, and having that cliffhanger of like, oh, what do we do now? Kind of thing would have been a better choice, I feel.
Yeah, because here in episode 2, they're kind of like, well, she's dead. Oh no, Star bought us a week. We don't have time to mourn. And it's quite literally, yeah, you don't have time. Whose fault is that?
Really, your prep work for this is kind of lacking there. It's
yeah. I mean, I am excited to see where season 7 goes. I know I've like nitpicked it to high heaven, and and we will continue to nitpick this, especially because we're starting the final battles soon, and in the manga, won't give too much away, but the manga's also like, hey, the ending might be coming sooner than you think. So we have a lot to keep track of with My Hero Academia this year. There's a new movie, plenty to talk about in the future. But for now, it's time to pay some bills. And we're going to take a brief break, kind of recollect ourselves, and come back. We'll talk about the biggest new entry of the spring, the final new entry, it's finally here in full, Demon Slayer Season 4. So we'll be right back with Anime Initiative. Please keep tuned. And welcome back to Anime Initiative, the anime focus segment of Comic Book Nation. And here is the meaty segment of our show, the whole anime Luffy meat thing once again. So is officially back for season 4 after making us wait through several weeks and months into the spring. But it's finally back for the Hashira training arc of Koyoharu Gotoge's original manga series, and it started out with an hour-long premiere. This is the same premiere that was shown in theaters like a month or so ago or 2 months ago as part of the Hashira training arc movie event, which had the finale of the 3rd season together with the season 4 premiere, which is when I saw it. But thankfully, the version that's now released is not too different. Here they added the little cutting cards in between commercial breaks and stuff, the classic stuff like that. They edited for TV broadcast, but that's really the only difference. Thankfully, it's the same hour-long premiere. And so, Evan, what did you think of full spoilers, by the way? We're going deep. I hope you checked out that hour-long premiere. We're jumping into this. We really want to dig in. So, Evan, what did you think of Demon Slayer's season 4 premiere?
I hated it. No, I'm kidding. No, actually,
Wow. Oh man.
Just that's how it starts, and then I say nothing else. No, honestly, like I really dug it. I think that one of the things that I really was looking forward to talking with on the podcast and with you, Nick, specifically, is the fact that our boys Inosuke and Zenitsu are back.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank the Lord. Because I think that like one of the things, and I think this is pretty much like universally accepted. There's not a lot of things that anime fans can truly agree on, but I think that a lot of anime fans can really agree on the fact that like season 3, there's just something missing. And I think that it's pretty universally accepted that like it kind of goes, you can debate whether like if season 1 or season 2 was the best, but I think like season 3 in the Swordsmith Village arc just wasn't able to be as good as what had come before. And you can attribute that to a number of different things. I know that Nick, you've said in the past kind of that there's the idea that season 3 was really more of a giant fight versus like character development, or as much character development as there was in seasons 1 and 2. I totally agree with that. If I were to have to rank them, I would still probably go with like season 1 being the best, and then season 2, and then way lower season 3. Not to necessarily say that it was like a terrible season by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that there was really something missing when it came to having the humor that's inherent in both Inosuke and Zenitsu being able to kind of bounce off Tanjiro and everything. I felt that was kind of missing with the Swordsmith Village arc.
Right.
Ufotable still has amazing animation. Like that's still one of the best selling points of Demon Slayer's anime as a whole. I dig what they are kind of building up to with assembling the Hashira and kind of setting up this new training arc for the young Demon Slayers, as it were. So I'm down for what is to come with this shorter season in terms of what we're seeing with season 4.
Yes, and jumping off of that, Evan, I 1000% agree. I have been sitting on these reactions for quite a while. I believe one of our earliest Anime Initiative episodes, I kind of hinted at my reaction to it. So this is going to be the season that kind of makes or breaks the anime and kind of makes or breaks the fandom, really, because like you said in season 3, that's kind of where the cracks started to show in terms of what kind of series this was. And when you look back at season 2, the Entertainment District, it really was also one long extended fight. But here, in season 3, it did the same thing, but it was missing some of those key elements like Inosuke and Zenitsu, who immediately show up in season 4 as I don't know if this was Gotoge's way of being like, they're here, don't worry. Like in the manga at that point, you're like,
back, baby.
Yes, but in the anime, it kind of feels that way. Like it kind of feels like, don't worry, they're back. You won't be missing them for too long. They are here and are involved in what's coming next. And that's kind of what season 4 is doing. It's the setup. So without giving too much away for what's coming next, Demon Slayer is like My Hero Academia. It's getting very close to that finale, and season 4 is the last like lull period we'll have. Like it's literally a calm before the storm. Like in the
Yeah.
premiere, you see the Hashira get together for a meeting, and they announce that they kind of need to also awaken their Demon Slayer marks in order to fight Muzan, as now that Nezuko has the ability to survive in the sunlight, they kind of need to step up their game because Muzan and the final members of the upper ranks will be making their move. And that's kind of like this is that moment that's like, okay, we're going to see them train over the course of these coming episodes this spring, and that I don't know how fans are going to feel about this, because as we both know, as anime fans and as buddies, watching along or listening to the podcast later, will know also, training arcs can be very divisive among people, right? Like you can either knock it out of the park, or you can do or kind of like fall flat on your face. Like that's unfortunately it. And this is where people start to tune out. So I'm very curious as to where season 4 will end up.
I remember that one of your, when you because to let our listeners know, Nick has read the manga completely,
yes,
and I have been avoiding spoilers in terms of like what happens to it, or what happens in the. But for also to let our fans know, Demon Slayer has been over since I think like 2020. That's when the last chapter. That's when the last chapter came out. So the ending of the anime is coming soon, and there's been no like hints that like there's a sequel or
this is going to be it. Like when it's over, it's over. And like Evan, like you were wondering, like as someone just watching the anime, you're like, oh, how are they going to end it? And this is going to be the big question, because the reason why we keep saying this is going to be so short is because the Hashira training arc is only about like 8 or 9 chapters in the original manga, which is why when it was announced for a full season rather than, let's say, this is where you would need a movie or like something, an OVA special or something like that, because the chapter content is so short before the final battles begin. Like quite literally, like the final chapter of this arc starts off the big final battles. And then the final battles themselves, the next arc is like 40 something chapters, which is double the length of any season we've seen adapted so far, which is also why it's like, okay, what do you do in season 5? Do you go back to season 1 and kind of do the 26 episodes again? Do you do a season 5 part 1 and a season 5 part 2 and then a season 5 part 3, the final chapters? Like do you do because then after that there's a 20 chapter final battle, which is like, okay, here we are again. So what do you do? And this is the turning point. This is quite literally it. This is where fans decide, like Eddie Redmayne also pointed out, this won the Crunchyroll Awards, like best fantasy and stuff for like a ton of it. But will it happen again this season? I don't think so.
I think it's and I think it's I'm kind of shocked that they haven't done, or they haven't attempted to do some kind of filler stuff. Like obviously like filler is the for those who don't know, filler,
it's a bad word. It's one
of the worst words in the anime medium. Filler, for those who don't know, is when an anime studio will effectively create original material in order to create new episodes that didn't originally happen in the manga itself. And we've seen that a lot. I think the most notorious examples are from Naruto with Studio Pierrot kind of creating original stories to create. There's more filler in Naruto than there is like content that was based on the source material. One Piece has done it. Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super have done it. And for the most part, Demon Slayer Studio hasn't been kind of diving into that well. We'll see if they do it. I think that'll be really interesting to see if they do, to kind of stretch it out, because, as you kind of said, Nick, they could do one long final season maybe like one final season and one big movie to kind of wrap everything up, as it were. That's kind of how I always thought that they would kind of do it, is that like having that final fight be its own original movie that is eventually brought into a television series seems like it would kind of work pretty well in terms of like, this is see the finale on the big screen first before you do it, and just like watch the money come in terms of that.
Right.
But like, what are your thoughts on that, Nick?
Yeah, because it would go I do think that Mugen Train was just too successful. Like it kind of backfired.
So successful.
You know, it was so successful that they were like, well, okay. And this is why they eventually re-released it as anime episodes. They kind of chopped it up into pieces because it was kind of like, I do think that kind of locked him into needing some kind of movie event, which is why in the season since we've had those world tours for 2 episodes of the anime. And that's kind of like, yeah, that'll work until there's a finale movie. And what'll happen there is we'll probably get a finale movie and then it'll be chopped up into episodes later. So I do think there's enough material to last an entire season with that final battle, but we'll see how they handle it. And that's kind of like, that's kind of the main question with Demon Slayer is how are they going to handle things? Because it's not like, you know, it's not really what you kind of expect, because, you know, when you talk filler and you talk original content, it is because production schedules, you know, on shows like Naruto, it's because the weekly production schedules would always catch up to where the weekly release of the manga was. And in order to buy more time, they would start these original arcs and kind of fill in that time to let the manga move. And that's not the case with seasonal releases like Demon Slayer. They don't need to do that stuff. And once they also don't need to do it because it's a complete series. So they are adapting a complete series. So every little decision is quite intentional for what they do. And we've already see original content in this premiere, like the action focused premiere with the snake and the wind Hashira kind of like cutting through demons, and we kind of see the first look at the Infinity Castle itself. That's all original. That wasn't in the original manga. This is like the manga starts us off with the Hashira meeting and the whole talk from there, and it does the training bits, but we don't see a lot of the training bits. And it's mostly, this arc itself is mostly to flesh out one of the Hashira in particular, who kind of like who goes against the training, and, you know, the water Hashira who's like straight up like, nah, I don't want to do any of that. So this is kind of the time where we get to learn more about him and learn about his place in the story and his place in this world. And this is kind of also where like the character stuff kind of ends. I hate to say this, like I'm trying to like dance around where this stuff is going because a lot of the issues with Demon Slayer is that we don't get character work until someone's on their deathbed. It's literally like we get death flashbacks, right? Like we get to see what the demons were like as humans before things happen as they're dying. And it's like, what is going on here? It's because we've had so much focus on the fight. And this would have been the perfect time to like give us a full 12 episode season and just kind of flesh out who these Hashira are, because then after this it's just more fighting.
that's why I was like earlier in the show I kind of ranked the seasons, and that's why I am a bigger fan of the first season, is because it gives us such a look into who Tanjiro and Nezuko are. It gives us our introductions to Inosuke and Zenitsu, and kind of, you know, lays out who they are as characters, what makes their personalities unique versus who else we've seen, as well as like balancing that with the killer fights against the Spider Clan and everything that kind of cap off how that first season goes. I think that like one of the things, aside from the amazing, and I mean really like the amazing animation that just sells the series, works so well in that first season, I think that Tanjiro's fight against the head of the Spider Clan was one of the big things that really said, hey, everybody, look at what we're doing with Demon Slayer. I mean, I know that got me into it way more, but the being able to see all of that character development and everything, I think worked really well in that first season and kind of built up to a lot of the cool stuff that we saw in season 2 and everything. And you're totally dead on. Like, why does all the character development have to happen when a character is about to die? Like, that totally happened in season 3 with the Mist Hashira.
Yeah.
That definitely didn't necessarily happen as much as with because one of my favorite demons was and tell me if I'm mispronouncing the name on this, Gyoko, the demon who was inside of the vases and everything. I thought his design was so cool, and we didn't really learn a lot about like his backstory. I think we learned a little bit more about Hentengu.
Yeah,
And like
what I
how he
loved about
worked.
him, like what I loved about him though, is that some people are just scumbags, and that's kind of like Demon Slayer is allowed to have like one or two of those. That
Sure.
I won't be like, yeah, because you can have an evil demon be evil, and that's just kind of it. And we're, his whole thing was that, yeah, I'm gonna twist you to form my art, and we didn't really
Mhm.
need like for him specifically. I do think that we didn't need a flashback of like the human artist finding out
Yeah.
that, oh, this is true art, like twisted human pain is art. Yeah, we didn't need that. Sometimes scumbags are scumbags, and that's totally fine. Yeah, right. Like, but you're right. Like for the more intriguing characters like Daki and Gyurotaro in season 2, where it's like we get to have these big flashbacks towards the end of the season after the fight's kind of over, and it's like, well, we're like in a better series, in a better flowing series, we would get to see this stuff mid battle. I know it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you don't want to take your attention away from the fight happening, but also kind of, yeah. Like you bring up One Piece as an example. It's like One Piece goes on these huge flashback arcs, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes when you're in them, in the weeks that you're in them, you're like, oh, I could go for the end of this. Like, I don't need this to last any longer. But then, like, once you're out of them and you're maybe like a year out, you're like, oh, that's why we saw that flashback. And that's
Hmm.
something that we could have seen in Demon Slayer, where it's like, you get a flashback and then it comes back around. That's the point of them, right? The point
Mhm.
of flashbacks is to serve that purpose. And it started really happening in the early stuff, and then now it's going to happen more and more, and fans are going to see this more and more.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious that after this first episode, like, how are people going to respond to a season without that big battle? Like, this is going to be a season without that season long demon fight. So I know
It's
season
gonna
one, yeah, like
it's oh yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, I know season one, people fell off until episode 19 told them, hey, this is a show you should watch. Like, it's literally like, if you go back in comic books coverage of the show, I hate to pull back the curtain on this, but if you go back in comic books coverage, like we were like, yeah, this show's good. We'll cover things. We'll cover the trailer. We'll talk about spin outs and stuff. But once episode 19 hit, that interest was finally there. And that's because it had those fights. And season
Yeah.
4 will not have those. So what are you thinking, Evan?
I think that like so we try to we give the most balanced take on on anime as we can, and I think that like yeah we do talk a lot, we do talk about some negative stuff, but also like I would be remiss if I also didn't mention the fact that like one of the cooler things about this is we talked about the idea that like yeah it doesn't necessarily this is going to be a lot more training stuff. I did appreciate the fact that they brought back my dude, the Sound Hashira Tengen, back after he had, if folks remember from the end of the season 2, the Entertainment District arc, he of all the characters, he was perhaps injured the absolute most and did not
Yes.
die. He lost an eye, he lost an arm. At the end of that season, he was basically like, I'm good, man. I gotta retire. This is just I'm really beat up. But now he's back. He looks a little different. He looks a little older. I think that like a lot of the characters in Demon Slayer, and I did kind of notice this in season 4 a lot, is that a lot of the characters look a lot younger than they appear, except for and Nick, you can help me out with this. Who is the Hishira who's like 12 feet tall and he's constantly crying and
Oh,
he's
Gyome?
Yeah. He's the Rock Hashira. Correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong.
the Stone Hashira, the
The
leader,
stone.
which is
Yeah.
why in the premiere when he does his clap, it's like okay, yeah, or like he's like enough, and it's like
And
oh,
no,
we gotta listen now.
everybody's gotta listen. And so I thought that the premiere did kind of work in terms of bringing back a lot of the characters that we hadn't seen for a good while, in terms of not just Tengen but also Inosuke and Zenitsu. And I think that one of the benefits of this season, not necessarily diving into a lot of the fighting stuff, is that maybe this will give the anime the opportunity to kind of do some character work that we hadn't
Yeah,
seen before we get into the big stuff that's a lot of the fights and the battles and everything like that. That'll be kind of interesting to see. And I think it's pretty much, we have reported on the fact that this is confirmed to be 8 episodes on top
it's
of the.
not quite confirmed yet. Those are
Oh, not
still
confirmed yet.
those are
Okay.
so I will say I'm going to clarify that just a bit, that this is still like people are floating around 8 episodes is like the big rumor, and that would make sense as there are basically that many weeks left in the spring season.
Hmm. So that would be interesting, but that kind of makes sense in terms of the training arc that they're going to, versus the manga and everything, and how they're going to kind of move forward with this. Me personally, like, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what they do in terms of like what can they learning a little bit more about the Hashira, kind of what makes them tick, and maybe like what they can do, because we haven't really seen what the Stone Hashira can do yet. He's been very imposing so far in terms of seeing all the Hashira back to back. And while we were able to kind of see the Snake Hashira and the Wind Hashira kind of unleash a little bit more of their powers in the original content that we saw in this premiere, I'm anxious to kind of see, the training that they're able to do, and how Tanjiro and the rest are able to kind of move with the punches, as it were, and everything.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because as much as I dog on Demon Slayer and will continue to, because as is my nature, as as much as I dog on it, I'm still watching every episode every week as it
Mhm.
airs. Like I'm still very curious to see how the anime will approach it, because once again, with the completed manga, you have that benefit of retrospects, of
Mhm.
looking at how the manga eventually ended and looking at how Gotoge kind of laid it all the groundwork out for the finale. And so I'm hoping the anime team kind of took that and like is able to elevate the material by kind of doing some of the necessary setup for future events. Like this is, in the manga it all feels so sudden, and it makes
Mhm.
more sense in a manga where every week you kind of have to have some action in it, and it
Yeah.
makes sense that you get 40 chapters of fights, and I'm sure that season's going to be great when we finally get to it. But here it's like you need to do that necessary groundwork in order to make a training arc work. Once again, going back to our original posit there of like what a training arc, like what do you need to succeed, and ultimately I think it's necessarily setting up that story. It's setting up why training is important, what this like it's not necessarily the training itself, because as
Mhm.
we've seen with action shows and action anime, it's kind of just like okay, at the end of it they'll just get whatever new form, new ability, whatever, right? This is standard stuff. The end point is not really the goal. The goal is it's literally the journey to get there. It's the journey of strength to build that to that point, and setting up why we should care about what's coming next. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes this season a big turning point.
Mhm. It's a risk. I think it's always a
Mm-hmm.
risk, but I think that having the opportunity to kind of dive further into all of these characters, I think will ultimately benefit in terms of the hard-hitting final fights that we're about to see. And I'd love to get your opinion on this, Nick, since you kind of know what's coming. Um, do you think that they're just going to keep doing the same kind of structure with the movies moving forward, like the Demon Slayer movies, where they're just kind of combine that season finale of this one and then the season premiere of the next one and slam it together? Maybe I guess one or two more times they can kind of do that.
I do think so. I think that's a good idea, especially if they do the Attack on Titan, release your final season across like 5 years or whatever, how long Attack on Titan was out.
You gotta milk this. You gotta milk it.
And and that's the thing. And Gotoga, always give that creator credit for like no ending the series, right? It's just like, regardless of how popular the anime was getting at the time, the creator was like, nope, that's it. I have a plan. I'm going to get to that ending. That ending's here. It's over. And that's kind of it. It's going to be different from the anime because there are a lot more people involved. There are a lot more, people who kind of, it's a company, right? Like there's a whole production company that's kind of like looking at this show and looking at how much success it has. And, the cynical part of me is like, well, yeah, like Evan, I think you're right. I think we're going to see, a lot of more of those theatrical events before there's a movie and then a final season. I think it's going to be like that. I think we're going to get a Mugen Train situation where we get to see it in theaters and then they'll do a re-edited version down the line, or maybe vice versa. Maybe we'll see a season first and then edited movie later, like a Gurren Lagann style, where it's like, we see the anime and then you see the movie to see some like better animation or like more fleshed out whatever.
And we'd kind of talked about it a little last week, but also like, and I totally agree with you on this, Nick, because yes, sometimes let manga artists end the stories how they want to.
Yeah.
I think that in a way, like me, because obviously we're giant anime fans and like comic book fans, we're always going to see Spider-Man stories and Superman stories and Batman stories, and they're always going to continue. But for a lot of manga artists, they kind of look at their story and think, okay, this is the natural progression and this is how we're going to end this story. But also considering the amount of output that it takes for these stories to be created, please let them end it so they do not become just horribly injured like the creator of Hunter x Hunter and so many other manga artists are just like, they put their heart and soul into these things and we want them to survive. We want them to live long lives. So I'm totally down for this. See, I don't know how Demon Slayer ends. You do, Nick, but I'm totally fine with like this being the end and there not necessarily being a sequel story or spin-offs to kind of continue this universe moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, speaking of endings, I think that's a great place to wrap up our conversation here. Demon Slayer Season 4 is now exclusively streaming with Crunchyroll. The English dub release has yet to be announced, and so keep up with Comic Book. We will keep you updated. Hopefully we'll get to reveal it on a future episode of Anime Initiative. We'll see how it all shakes out. But thank you for joining the Anime Initiative, the anime-focused segment of Comic Book Nation, the same place where you get good geek culture stuff all over the world, all over the internet. Well, yeah, all over the world because the anime, right? So, yeah, of course, you have the main show, Comic Book Nation. You have the gaming focus show, Quick Save. You have the comic book show, The Pull List. And of course, you have us, Anime Initiative. And then there's the Marvel focus show. If you go see Phase Zero, they're also there and doing their good stuff. So we are here bringing you live every day with content, all sorts of good stuff all throughout the week. I'm Nick Valdez. You can find me at Valdezology on all the socials. If you want to hit me up, Evan, where can they find you?
You can find me at EV Comedy on all the socials. And very, very quickly, we didn't have the time to cover it on this episode. Scavenger's Reign has been canceled by Max. This is a personal plea to all of our listeners. It is coming to Netflix at the end of the month. And Netflix has stated, or it has been reported, that should the series get enough viewers on Netflix, it may be renewed for a second season. That show is amazing. If you haven't seen Scavenger's Reign, take the opportunity to watch it. It is, if you want original science fiction animation, please watch that show. I know I will be watching it again. Yeah, so that's it.
Yes. Oh, yes. Support animation, support good original stuff so that we get more of it. Please, please. That is especially what we love in Anime Initiative. We love animation. Give us more. And on that note, please, if you liked our stuff, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow us on our feeds. Please check out and give us reviews so we can shout you out on the show and kind of like acknowledge that, we have people listening to us and checking us out. And we would love to see that. But thank you for joining the Anime and Shoot Up this week, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.